How does colonialism shape the world we live in today? So, this was a panel of several guest speakers who were talking about the impact of imperialism and colonization and the ways that it continues to influence the world today. I want to make sure that you understand that it influences language, how we understand what is proper language, how we value different forms of language. It informs religion, it informs cultural beliefs, it informs our legal and economic systems. Colonialism is still actively circulating and influencing the world that we are in today. The kinds of practices that are included under colonialism, slavery, genocide, and the creation of political and economic divisions, rules of law, and infrastructure. A lot of our understandings of hierarchies around race and racism, gendered hierarchies, ableism, mental health, all come out of this colonial process in the ways that they created value around certain lives. I want to address number four because I think it might be a little bit challenging. The majority of private capital is allocated to the developed countries, Europe, North America, and Japan. And not just that the majority of private capital is allocated to them, but one of the effects of colonialism is that colonial powers of the West still have economic control over a lot of the formerly colonized, newly independent nations. And so they're still exacting not just land resources, but they're exacting economic resources through taxation, corrupt governments, inequitable trade agreements, and that kind of thing. American colonialism is cultural imperialism, and it's circulated widely through American media imperialism. American media is a dominant force globally. I want to be clear about number six, too, especially since a couple of the writers that we've read have argued that colonialism left some advancements or benefits, right? You, more literacy, railroads, roads, sanitation systems, different forms of infrastructure. So, two things. One, none of those advancements were intended for the pleasure of those who were being colonized. Those advancements were for the utility of the colonizer. So, if you think about this question, initially, what was the intended purpose of the English educational system in India? It was so that they could develop translators or interpreters for the colonial government and the vast Indian population. So it wasn't about let's educate these people. If you think in terms of literacy, most places had modes of communicating and methods of writing. And so our ideas and conceptualizations of literacy are very much a colonial process. It's very much a Eurocentric colonial idea, a Eurocentric colonial ideology, right? Just because someone is practicing their writing, communication in a different form doesn't make our form of communication or literacy more accurate or more developed, right? Most colonized people couldn't use the railroads. Most colonized people didn't have access to this new advanced sanitation, even though they were the ones who were creating the sanitation systems. They weren't given access to these things. So there's limitations to that argument that it left particular benefits, right? And who's to say what growth would come without colonial intervention? We'll never know how those places could have developed without the influence of European forces. We'll never know how both the Western world and the so-called East would develop if they were more collaborative in nature and not a Western societies dominating the global East. The liberal side of colonialism is modernity. Colonialism's agenda was land appropriation, resource extraction, and human labor exploitation. These were some key quotes that I thought were important that you should take note of. Empire is actually capitalism in practice is a significant idea for you to wrestle with. And then one way in which we all share in the legacy of European empire is that most of us live in capitalist economies. Capitalism is very much tied up in the imperial project. When they met in 1884 in Berlin, they weren't meeting for cultural exchange. They weren't meeting in reality to offer some kind of aid to Africa or any of the other colonized places. When they met and when they decided to colonize different spaces, Africa, the New World, the Americas, Canada, wherever, they did it because they understood the economic value of those places. They understood the kinds of gains that could make the modern West. Okay, so that is the end of that one.